Do you have a favorite special education curriculum, or are you always on the lookout for something better? Today's episode is all about special education curriculum, what it includes, what to look for, and is it even necessary? I'm going to be sharing my own experiences on different curriculums that I have used. Let's get started. Hey, special educators, I'm Jennifer from Positively Learning. Welcome to the Special Educators Resource Room. If you're like me, you're always looking for ways to save time and streamline your work. That's why this podcast was created, to give you the systems and solutions you need to get your time back. Tune in for tips, tricks, and tools that will help you manage your workload and make the most of your time. Whether you're brand new or experienced, all are welcome in the Special Educators Resource Room. When I was first planning out this episode, I thought it was pretty cut and dry. I could share all the different curriculums that I have tried out and their results, what I've loved, what I wish they still had, and all that good stuff. And I'm still going to be doing some of that. But as I was talking about special education curriculum and it was on my mind, I had a conversation with a very experienced gen ed teacher. Now, I was pretty much geeking out and talking about finding the unicorn special education curriculum and what it would look like and everything it would include. And she's listening, and then all of a sudden she stops me and says, "What are you talking about?" She's like, "Why would you need a curriculum? What makes you think that you should be using a curriculum?" She said it really nicely, though. And now it was my turn to be confused. We went back and forth a little bit in this conversation, but basically she, as an experienced gen ed teacher, worked with a even more experienced special educator. And they truly planned their lessons together, and it was all based on the general education curriculum. So her question to me was, why would you be using something separate? Aren't you supposed to be using the gen ed curriculum? To which I responded, yes, but it just doesn't always work out that way. It gave me a lot to think about, and I walked away from the conversation thinking, why was I thinking about special education curriculum so much? Where did this idea come from? What I should have mentioned at the very beginning of this episode is I am referencing curriculum that we would use in an intervention setting. Maybe it's pushing into the inclusion classroom or pulling out to the resource room. I'm not referencing a curriculum like unique learning systems or something that you would be using in a self-contained setting. In my own experience, I was always pulling small intervention groups. Sometimes we'd use the gen ed curriculum and just have more hands-on or direct instruction in these groups. Sometimes I was completely reteaching, and I wasn't going to reteach exactly the same way the gen ed curriculum did. I was going to reteach in a way my students needed. I always felt I was scrambling, and I think it's a common feeling because one of the most popular questions I see in Facebook groups, including the Special Educators Resource Room Facebook group, is, what curriculum do you use? What do you use for math? What do you use for social emotional learning? And the response is always F, following, and so on. So I know I'm not the only one. And maybe this unicorn curriculum doesn't exist because it's not supposed to exist. We should be using the gen ed curriculum. It's a lot to unpack. And I don't know the correct answer. I can only share my own experiences. So here's a list of some of the different curriculums that I have used. For small reading groups, I've tried out LLI, Reading Mastery, Read Naturally, SIPs, Foundations, Reading A to Z, Making Meaning, and the CKLA, both the general education curriculum and the remediation guide, Open Court, and I think that's probably it. For math, we've tried out Do the Math. I think there was some other gen ed curriculums we might have used, like Go Math and Hands-on Standards by Hand to Mind, all of Kathy Richardson's assessment resources, and then Eureka Math for gen ed. And for social emotional learning, we had access to Second Steps, and then I was mostly piecing it together by things I found online and things my students needed. Well, that is a long list. So wonder we're always so tired. I'm probably forgetting half of the things that we've tried out and quickly moved on from. What I did end up finding the most success with was looking at the gen ed curriculum, if there is one, taking those lessons, and hacking them with what my students needed. Maybe these hacks are access points, opportunities for my students to participate in the general education curriculum with the appropriate supports. Maybe these hacks were shortening the lesson or adjusting the pacing. They also may have been hacked to include my students' IEP goals and objectives. I could look at the curriculum, look at my students' goals and objectives, and sort of mesh them together. Reflecting on all of these different things I was trying to do just brings back memories of how exhausting it was. It was exhausting always rewriting. I felt like I was reinventing the wheel. I didn't understand why this wasn't existing out there, why I couldn't find what I needed. I was spending so much time and my own money. I was purchasing things on TPT left and right, always looking for that unicorn, something I could use with my students that would not take them completely away from the gen ed curriculum, but it would also meet their needs. You can probably see where all of this is leading. I couldn't find what I needed. I was already writing it all out, so I decided to make my own intervention curriculum. I think about the beginning days and how excited I was that once and for all, I would have what my students needed. I'm so glad I had that excitement in those early days because it really carried me through. This was a huge undertaking, and I can only smile now because I just finished. After a couple of years, I now have a complete intervention curriculum. So let me tell you what my dream was and how it turned out. My dream was to have a curriculum that I could pick and choose. I wanted a special educator to look at a series of lessons and think, okay, here's what my students need. Maybe it's because of their IEP goals and objectives. Maybe you're doing progress monitoring. Maybe it's with the gen ed curriculum that you're trying to align everything. You can choose from the scope and sequence any lesson. All right, I'm going to use lesson number 16. Let me pull it out. It has everything I need in one place. Not lesson 16. Okay, wait a minute. Let me go back to lesson 9. Or maybe I'll move forward to lesson 31. Whichever lesson you're choosing, you have everything you need from start to finish. Wouldn't that be amazing? And that's real life. Students don't just magically move through a scope and sequence smoothly from lessons 1 through 40. In reality, students' needs are here, there, everywhere. And some students are there every day. Some students are being pulled during our small group time or have absences. You need to be able to adjust quickly. Okay, what else do these lessons have? They are complete lessons on their own. They're not dependent on the lesson before or the lesson after, although you certainly could follow a scope and sequence. And what do these lessons include? They start off with a warm-up, which serves as a quick hook that often uses student support visuals. Then there's guided practice with suggestions to gradually release the activity to students or student pairs when they are still with you in the small groups. There's opportunities for independent practice, for assessment to see how your students are doing, and there's even an extension. A general education teacher could grab this intervention lesson and teach it from start to finish, or a special education teacher may take this lesson and spread it over a couple of days with small groups. It's ready to go as is, and that lesson is also editable so that you can include exactly what your student needs. I think my very favorite part, and the part that I worked so hard on doing, was I created 2 task boxes for every single lesson. And I gave suggestions on how we're going to use these task boxes during the lesson, during the guided practice, during the independent practice, and you can use the same task box for data. We all know that things change quickly. Maybe one school year, all of your students are in the inclusion classroom, working in the gen ed curriculum with minimal support. Then you can use these task boxes as part of your independent work system. We also know there's other years where we are providing direct instruction for reteaching or pre-teaching almost everything our students are doing. If you're using these intervention lessons in that way, then all of these task boxes support each lesson objective. What content areas are these lessons available in? Well, I made 40 early literacy lessons with 80 task boxes. I made 40 math lessons with 80 task boxes, 40 social emotional learning lessons with 80 task boxes, and 40 life skill lessons with 80 task boxes. So to add it all up, there's 160 editable lessons. There's a scope and sequence for the 4 content areas: literacy, math, life skills, and social emotional learning. However, each lesson is standalone. So a gen ed teacher could go in and grab one lesson, and a special education teacher can use the scope and sequence and go in order, whichever way works best for your students. And there's 320 individual task box sets. That's a complete year's worth. Use them in your independent work systems or match them to each lesson. There's 2 per lesson objective. If you're familiar with the TaskBox Dollar Club, they are set up in the exact format. However, there are no duplicates. So if you're part of the club and you have these task boxes, you are really going to be set for the school year. As you can tell, I'm really excited about this. It was what I was always searching for. It meets students' needs with the developmentally appropriate practices, but it really meets teachers' needs by saving time and having everything in one place, plus the flexibility to make it your own. Now let's return to the original question. Should you be using a special education curriculum? Or maybe we should rename it as an intervention curriculum or an intervention toolkit. I don't know what the correct answer is, but I do know that there are supports out there. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'll put a link in the show notes so you can check out this intervention toolkit curriculum. Take a look at the flexible scope and sequence for each unit, the editable lesson plans, the student task boxes, and the unique way of tracking data on each lesson plan. There's also Maximizer Minutes. This is where I show up and I give teaching tip for all 160 lessons. Just click on the audio for each lesson and you will hear my voice. Let me know if you have any questions about this episode or about the intervention curriculum. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks so much for listening to this long episode, and I'll catch you next time in the Special Educators Resource Room. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I'm dying to ask, what'd you think? Be sure to hit the follow or subscribe buttons so that you never miss an episode. You can find the show notes and links for everything mentioned in this episode at positivelylearningblog.com. See you next week for more special education solutions.